What does Vincent do while you're with this guy? Well, Vince finds men on the internet who are willing to let him into the room. He likes to watch, but it's also safer. I think so, I replied, shaking my head. How long have you two been doing this? About 4 years, she answered casually, as if we were discussing gardening. So what about Marcy? Oh yes. Marcy, she answered with a smile, crossing her legs. She came over a couple of weeks ago and said she agreed, but I would have to do it with you when she left the country with her surgical group. Did she tell you anything about what or who she would be doing while she was gone? No, but we are women. I had the feeling that she was compromising her conscience. What exactly? Well, she probably knew what she would do there. Allowing me to have access to you may have been something that eased her conscience. Leslie shook her head. Honestly, I wish she had talked to you beforehand. I don't like this cheating, sneaking. I didn't answer anything to this. Even Leslie thought so. I have something for you, Leslie said. The letter that Marcy left for me to give to you. Reaching into her purse, she pulled it out and handed it to me. Come on, read it. I'll go to the ladies' room. She made a gesture and facial expression as if asking which way. Further down the corridor to the right. Thank you. I'll be back soon, Leslie said, smiling and emptying her glass. The envelope was simple. There was only one word on it. Riku. Taking a deep breath, I opened it and began to read. Dear Rick, I'm a coward, and by the time you read this, you'll know that I'm breaking my vows with Trey. But before you pass judgment on me, think about you and Deirdre in Iraq. I have no proof, but I'm pretty sure you and her had sex in Iraq. You're a terrible liar, Rick. But then I'm no better. The first time Trey touched me, I didn't tell you. Maybe I should have done this. And perhaps I should have had an affair or affairs during all those years I was home alone and lonely while you were playing soldier. God knows, I've already suffered enough. Our kids needed 2 parents, Rick. I tried to be both mom and dad, but I'm not you. Only you are you. And I needed my husband's touch, damn it. But I resisted being pestered and remained faithful to you. God knows, it wasn't easy. Then you went to Iraq, and your dear Deidre Klein returned home before you. That bitch came to see me and smugly said she took care of you there, then left before I could ask what she meant. But when you came back, I knew exactly what she meant. Any doubts I had were cleared away when you turned away in shame, Rick. I know 2 wrongs don't make a right, Rick. I also know that there is a possibility that you didn't do anything to her. In that case, I'm the first cheater here with Trey. But I do not think so. I think you were the first to do it. Maybe you've done this before or not. It may or may not have been the first time. But I'm tired of being an obedient wife, waiting at home and chasing after my war hero. When Leslie told me she was in love with you, I talked to both her and Vincent about it. He admitted that he allows her to have men. They have an open marriage. It looks like it won't be on my conscience to break up their marriage, only that I cheated on you. So this is the essence of the situation we find ourselves in. I am going on this trip, and during my absence, I am not your wife, and you are not my husband. You have a 6-week gym pass, and I'm giving myself that too. As far as I understand, if you and I love each other, we will forget about it when I see you upon my return. If we don't do this, I will be hurt, and I will mourn what you and I had and what we lost. Know that. Trey didn't seduce me or force me into it. I do this by my own choice and free will. I don't like him, but I find him attractive. When I return, all that will remain is a memory, if I am with you. What am I going to do with him after you divorce me? Well, it won't matter then, will it? Know this, Rick Weston. You were and remain the love of my life. Even after you broke my heart, I love you. It was my great honor to be your wife and mother to your children. But after all these years, I need a break from us. Leslie is more than willing to have sex with you until I get back. Vincent would pay you to let him watch. But it's your choice and the decision you have to make. I know she won't leave Vincent for you. He allows her to get many men this way. I doubt she wants to give it up. I'll leave you with one thought, Rick. If you love someone, set them free, and may he return to you. I'll be back in 6 weeks. I love you always and forever. Marcy P.S. Leslie should have been tested for STDs before she came to see you for the first time. Make sure she shows it. Trey and I were both screened before we left. I will get tested for you before I return, and will not touch him or anyone else until you and I meet. Then I'll show you my STD test. Please do this a week before I return and also abstain. This will be our first sign of trust. I booked a room for us at the Ambassador Hotel near the airport. If you want to meet me, be there 2 hours after my flight is due to return. I plan to go there alone after my arrival. Please don't come to the airport when my flight lands. Please don't make a scene. Either take me back or leave. I plan to meet you at the hotel. I'll be waiting in the lobby. After finishing reading, I noticed Leslie pouring herself another glass. Are you okay? She asked. I will, I answered. She nodded and returned with a bottle and a filled glass. This time, sitting next to me, she refilled my glass and turned to look at me with her doe eyes. So, Rick, what do we do? I looked at her and said, thank you for delivering the letter to Marcy. I hate what she wrote, but I really appreciate you giving me that letter. As for what we do nothing. I appreciate your offer, but I'm not like that. I won't deny that I'm attracted to you, but I won't be one of your lovers. I spent a lot of time in the army and overseas, but I was faithful to my wife with one very unfortunate mistake. I will not give Marcy free rein in what she has done and continues to do. With that, I stood up, took my glass of wine, and walked into the kitchen, pouring the wine into the sink. Leslie just looked at me, not moving. Honestly, I don't think she expected this answer. I think she was so used to having men at her beck and call, especially when she was proposing sex, that she was stunned and confused by my answer. When she continued to just sit there, I took the bottle of wine, inserted the cork, and handed it to her. Leslie, thank you again for delivering the letter to Marcy and for your offer. She finally understood what I was saying and what my actions meant. She stood up and walked towards me, trying her best to be seductive, but I had no desire to continue this conversation with her. She started to speak, but I cut her off before she could say a word. I am devastated by Marcy's actions. I'm asking to leave so I can understand what this means to me. With that, I led her out the door and handed her the remaining bottle of wine she had bought. Once outside the door, she turned and started talking again. But I slowly closed the door. To be honest, I wasn't trying to be rude, but I had no time for her. Having spent almost 30 years in the military, especially the last few years in intelligence, I had a lot of contacts and resources at my disposal. I also realized the mistakes I made with Marcy. First of all, I should have had a serious discussion with her about her actions while I was in Korea. Although she claimed to be faithful to me, I never discussed with her the issue of her showing up 2 hours early for her shift. I had to clear things up. Not knowing, of course, affected me more than I expected. Second, I had to be honest about my failure in Iraq. I guess I was too ashamed of what I did and I just couldn't be honest with her about it. I should have confessed to her as soon as I got back. Plus now I found out that bitch, Deidre, already said something to Marcy, giving her a reason to start an affair with Trey. Marcy asked me this outright 4 months ago and I continued to lie. As she wrote in her letter, Marcy was sure that I had lied to her about it. Third, I knew something was going on between her and Trey, but I didn't force the issue. This was mainly due to her asking me about Deirdre and the shame I felt about my actions. She was able to silence me by exploiting my inability to be honest with her. I took her letter and reread it. My first impression was that it was self-serving and full of her excuses for cheating. Reading it again didn't change my perception, but it did make me realize that the woman I loved, the woman I raised our children with, and the woman I thought I would grow old with, was gone. She was replaced by someone I didn't like and someone I was no longer in love with. I loved her because of my children, so I didn't want her to get hurt. But deep down, I knew it was over between us. I will never forgive her, and I will never trust her again. I also realized that the woman who wrote this letter was delusional. After 24 years, didn't she know me? How could she think that I could accept her actions? What struck me most, however, was her sense of self-worth. She truly believed that she deserved what she did. Her statement was complete crap. How can she claim that I am the love of her life, and then write, But I am tired of being an obedient wife, waiting at home and chasing after my war hero. What a contradiction. While her entire letter infuriated me, one statement really angered me. Playing soldier. What the hell? Marcy knew who I was and what I did when we got married. It was no secret. It was a hard life, but we got through it together. Does she think I enjoyed being away from my family? Did she think I liked being in the field and training or actually being in combat? How about turning down the opportunity to become a general because I understood the pressure it would put on our marriage? How could she have thought that continuing this case would be something we could survive? To hell with it all. Plus, she apparently avoided the possibility of having sex before the trip to say goodbye. I think she wanted to be fresh for Dr. Trey. Her quiet and unnoticed departure to the airport and then her complete silence until I forced her, and I realized that this woman did not really love me as she claimed. She was so obsessed with her desire, her vacation from us, that she didn't care about me or my feelings. Moreover, she did not respect me. I thought what we had was priceless. I see no. She wants to take a break from us, and she will have such a vacation for the rest of her life. It's time to take action and move forward without her. Again, I have a ton of contacts, so it's time to put them to good use. The next morning I went for a run, had a good workout, had a good breakfast, and then called my office saying I was taking a few days off. Having witnessed several marriages fail while in the military, I had a good idea of what to expect and what I needed to do to end this dying marriage. My next step was to contact an old Army buddy, Jackson Steele, who had served in the Jaguar Corps but had retired to go into private practice. I told him what happened, what was currently happening, and what I wanted. He introduced me to a woman who he called the best divorce lawyer he knew. I called her office and made an appointment for the next day. I told her secretary what the meeting was for, and she emailed me a list of documents she wanted me to bring to the meeting. I went online and paid off our joint credit cards and then canceled them. Marcy had a card in her name, so I knew I wouldn't inconvenience her. I then went to the bank and withdrew half the money from our savings and checking accounts, removing my name from them. I also removed all documents and items from our safe. Then I went to another bank and opened accounts in my name only. In addition, I have my own safe. After I left my new bank, I went to the HR department at my employer's office. I was a consultant, but I worked for a private company that had extensive contacts and contracts with the federal government. There, I changed my beneficiaries on my life insurance policy and 401k to children. I wanted to make sure that if something happened to me before the divorce was final, Marcy still wouldn't win. My next step was to call Jackson back. I told him to change my will to leave everything to the children. I have also appointed him as the executor of my estate. I was surprised that I was able to complete everything in one day. However, instead of resting, I went home and started packing. I was surprised at how many things no longer had any value to me. I think this was because many of the memories associated with these items were tainted by Marcy's actions. I left them for her. If she doesn't need them, she can get rid of them. The next day I met with Lisa Davis, the lawyer Jackson had recommended. She was a nice woman, and I was happy to have her as my lawyer. I had a feeling that she could be ruthless if necessary. I handed her all the documents I was asked to bring, as well as a copy of Marcy's letter. She went through everything, checked them out, put together a worksheet, and asked me questions about what I wanted to do with our shared property. I told her I wanted to sell the house and split the equity. If Marcy wanted, she could buy my share. I also wanted our joint investment account to be separate. In short, I did my best to be as fair as possible. I hated what Marcy did to us, but I didn't hate her. Lisa also asked me if I wanted to take any action against the hospital or Trey. I told her that I was not interested in taking any legal action against anyone. Over the next few weeks, I rented an apartment and finished packing everything I wanted to take from the house. In the end, there really wasn't much. I did not take any furniture, dishes, or anything with me other than my personal clothing and mementos from my Army career. Lisa hired a company to document everything in the house and estimate its value. Again, I wanted a fair settlement. I also talked to my boss about taking on more out-of-town and overseas assignments. With my daughter in the Navy and my son in college, There was nothing keeping me here anymore. 4 weeks before Marcy's return, I prepared everything. The divorce papers just needed to be presented to her so that she could sign them. Everything I wanted was packed, put in the garage, and ready to move into my new apartment. I furnished it with furniture, provided it with food and all necessary utensils, and I took with me most of my clothes. I doubt my neighbors had any idea what was going on. I continued to do all my normal activities to keep everything looking normal. I don't need to tell anyone about my plans until I decide it's time. I actually saw Vince and Leslie a few times. I was polite, but made it a rule to communicate with them very briefly. At one point, Vince came up to talk to me, but I pulled away, telling him that I was already leaving and I didn't have time to talk. Later that evening, Leslie called me, but I let it go to voicemail and deleted it without listening. Nothing they could say was important. The next week, I received a call out of the blue. I realized it was Marcy calling because it was an overseas phone number. We both had international plans on our cell phones, so I was surprised that she didn't call or text me on it. She left me a short message asking me to call her. She said cell coverage was bad, but she needed to talk to me. She didn't say what she needed or what the call was about, only that she needed to talk to me. I didn't call her back. I had nothing to say to her, and she had nothing to say that I wanted to hear. 3 days later, I received another call. This time she said that she was very worried about me and that she needed to talk to me. I don't really understand what's going on, but I ignored it and didn't call back. She wanted a break from us, and I gave it to her. Later that evening, Vince and Leslie came over. In this case, I didn't bother to open the door. The next day, I waited until I figured out that most of the neighbors had gone to work and asked a small moving company to come to the house to pick up the boxes I had placed in the garage. It took me and 2 guys about 20 minutes to move everything from the garage to our truck. The rest of my toiletries and clothes were in my car. I moved out of the house. For the next week, I was out of town for work. I think my absence from the house was noticed. Leslie called me, but I just told her I was out of town. I let her know that I didn't have time to talk, so we didn't discuss anything else. All this time, I maintained contact with my children, parents, and relatives. They checked on me, knowing Marcy was out of the country, and just made sure I was okay. I made sure everyone knew I was okay. I received another call from Marcy, but I ignored it. I didn't even bother to listen to the voicemail she left. I realized that a lot of what I've written makes it seem like I was handling this in a very clinical manner. But I'm truly devastated by Marcy's actions. To tell the truth, I was completely crushed by her attitude. The shock and anger I felt after our phone conversation, when I learned about her affair, and then read the letter and reflected on her behavior, turned into deep sadness. I realized that she had changed a lot. Moreover, her cavalier attitude toward me and my feelings proved to me that she believed she deserved what she did, regardless of how it affected anyone else. While working in intelligence, I worked closely with special operators. I provided the information they used and needed to do their job. I had contacts and made friends with some very serious and intimidating men. These people did everything they could to complete the mission. In short, they were as deadly as any human being on Earth. Due to the nature of my work, I continued to maintain semi-regular contact with several special operators, a couple of whom were from a specific team. My unnamed friend gave me a number to call if I ever needed his help. A week before Marcy was due to return, I called on my cell phone. I dialed the number and hung up without leaving a message. A few minutes later, they called me back. I spoke briefly with this person and hung up. Later that day, I met this man at a small biker bar about 50 miles from my hometown. I gave him his name, photo, and address. I told him what I wanted to do. In parting, I told him, "It's a hospital, not a morgue." The day Marcy returned, I sent out an email to my entire family and a select number of friends. In it, I confessed to my only failure in Iraq and took responsibility for my failures. I have also included a copy of Marcy's letter. I wasn't going to go scorched earth, but I let everyone know that I filed for divorce and the reasons for it. Before I sent the letter out to everyone, I sent it to my kids first. Then I called them and explained everything that was happening. I didn't want to blindside them, but I felt they deserved to know the whole story. They were both heartbroken over the divorce and Marcy's actions. Rhonda was especially angry with her mother. "I can't believe that Mom turned into such a person," my daughter screamed into the phone. Then she quickly added, "What the hell is she thinking? She was a role model for me, and now she's showing her worst side." I started to answer her, but realized that she was simply running out of steam and ignored it. Instead, I told them both, "I love you and I understand how this affects both of you, but we will get through this. Honestly, I don't understand what your mother is doing, but there's nothing more I can say or do. I don't trust her anymore, and I won't accept what she did. She has shown herself to be an incredibly selfish person who doesn't really care what others think or feel. Because of her attitude and actions, I am leaving her to live the life she chose." I continued, "Kyle, what do you think? I think Mom has gone crazy. I can't think of any other reason why she would do this." We really had nothing more to say, so we said goodbye and hung up. My next calls were to my parents and relatives. Both sets of parents couldn't believe it, especially Marcy's parents. I could only point to Marcy's letter as evidence of her attitude and actions. Of course, both sets of parents wondered if I could go through with it and get through counseling. I told them that wouldn't happen. I felt sorry for Marcy's parents. They were good people, and I could tell they were deeply hurt by her actions. I made those calls from the airport, and shortly after that last call, I boarded a plane and left for an overseas assignment. I had to leave the country for the next 2 months. Marcy will not see me at the hotel tomorrow or any other day, as she had hoped. The next day, the surgical team returned to the airport. I don't think they expected the reception they received. Josh was there to meet Penny and immediately attacked her, demanding to know who she slept with. Damn it, I called him and told him everything. He had the right to know who he was married to. Several other members of the club, both husbands and wives, suffered similar treatment. Josh made it a point to call and tell everyone what he knew and did everything he could to find out who Penny was sleeping with. Judging by the live feed that was given to me at my request, it was a pretty shitty show. Dr. Trey did his best to avoid all of this, but it seems his girlfriend didn't like Marcy sleeping with him during their trip. She hit them both and had to be physically restrained from doing anything else. In addition, several hospital staff and several representatives of Doctors Without Borders were there to find out what happened during the trip. Josh, of course, did everything he could to damage the reputation of the hospital and their organization. His threatened lawsuits have certainly attracted attention. It took about 10 minutes for everything to calm down. This was largely due to the arrival of the police and the separation of many of the greeters from the returning team. Hospital administrators pulled the team aside and told them to be at the hospital in the morning for a full briefing. They were told that their further work depended on the result. Around this time, a man dressed as a limousine driver approached Marcy and asked, "Are you Marcy Weston?" She had a confused look on her face and answered with a simple yes. He handed her a large manila envelope and said, "You have been served. Besides, Coronel Weston had a message for you. You are free." With these words, the man left a very shocked and surprised Marcy. I turned off the live stream I was watching and moved on with my life. However, this is not the end of this little story. Later that evening, Dr. Trey returned home, tired, and more than a little angry about the events at the airport. He didn't like it when his affair with a member of the surgical team was put on public display. His evening was about to get worse. Much, much worse. Dr. Trey was the victim of a home invasion robbery. The last thing he remembered was shock when he crossed the threshold of his house. He woke up a few days later in the hospital. His nose was broken. His left orbital bone was broken. He lost several teeth, and the fingers on his left hand were broken with his index finger and thumb crushed. His right elbow and right hand were broken, and all the fingers and thumb on his right hand were crushed. Dr. Trey's house was trashed, and a message was spray-painted on a blank wall. Don't mess with married women. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one.